Good morning and welcome to the May edition of the Dad X discussions with the National At Home Dad Network. Thank you so much for being here to join us today. I greatly appreciate everybody taking the time to join us. Again, my name is Matt Strain, and my guest today is going to be Buck Robinson. Buck is a 54-year-old husband and father of three who lives in Richmond, Virginia. As he puts it, he's gone from fat to fit, drunk to dry, and a broken man to an Ironman, all since turning 50. Once a self-described professional drinker, he realized that his hard partying lifestyle was not only making him miserable, but according to his doctor, it wasn't helping his health either. That stern warning, coupled with, the shocking genetic revelation, made him realize that he needed to make some major changes in his life. In doing this, it enabled him to achieve some amazing fitness goals. And most impressively, it enabled Buck to become an actual Ironman, completing a full distance Ironman triathlon. So without further hesitation, I'm going to go ahead and bring Buck on with us. Hey, Buck, good morning. Oh, I'm not getting any volume. You're muted.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Matt. Nice to be here, and I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I want to go ahead and say Buck and I met through the Athletic Brewing Ambassador Program. We're both brand ambassadors for Athletic. I've been following along your journey for a while. You and I have kind of a parallel journey going, only my move's a little bit slower than yours. I'm only doing the sprint and Olympic distance triathlons currently, whereas you've moved all the way up to the iron distance. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit.
Sure.
Now, you've got three kids.
I do.
And how old are they?
So my son is 16 and his name's Liam. And then I have identical twin daughters who are going to be 13 next month. So yeah, we've got a house full of teenagers and it is,
Ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a bit much. We haven't done the teenager thing yet.
I thought as we came out of the younger stages, life was, to be honest with you, I was excited about the young stages because I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And when they become teenagers, I'll just kind of fade into the background because they don't want to listen to me anyway. But it's actually been great. I love the conversations that we have. I love getting eye rolls every time I turn around. I love being told that I don't know what I'm talking about. But it's all of those things have worked out well, and they're awesome kids.
I will say, mine aren't teenagers yet. My oldest is only 10, but I am still getting told that I have no idea what I'm talking about. So I'm sure 3 years from now, when she hits her teen years, it's only going to be worse.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Now, you mentioned that 4 years ago, when you were 50, you had this huge revelation where you went to the doctor. If you don't mind sharing, what was that like?
Well, I think to give you some context, and I don't mean to not answer, I want to give some context to answer your question better, is that in my journey, I had been very unhealthy in my 30s, my early 30s, had hard partying lifestyle, had really kind of let my life go off track. And then I started my whole kind of transition with literally an attempt to run around the block. Like I had always been an athlete. So I thought in my mind, this is going to be no problem, easy peasy, blah, blah, blah. Went to run around the block and couldn't do it. And that's when I really had my first wake up to say, wow, what has happened? What have I done to myself here? Right. So that became training that turned into a 5K, that turned into a 10K, that turned into a half marathon, that turned into a marathon, and then ultimately into my first triathlon. And so I had been on a very health conscious trajectory in my life prior to meeting my wife here in Richmond and settling down and having our first child. And actually, through our first child, I was still doing a lot of that stuff, still training for marathons. I did my third Ironman when my son was 1 year old. So that was still very manageable. I could figure out how to do both of those things at the same time. When we found out that we were having twins, that changed everything, because now we went from, hey, I need to go out for a 3-hour bike. Can you take care of our son? To, we got 3 kids. There's no time, like you go out on a 3-hour ride, you might as well just keep going, right? Like, because you ain't coming back. So it massively changed everything in my life. But at the same point, I want to make it very clear, from a priority perspective, especially as an older dad, I was thrilled to even have that opportunity to have this new chapter in my life. All right. So that's now 30s, early 40s. Now we'll flash forward, and there's a lot in between there, but we'll get back to that. So now I'm turning 50, and that's a big milestone, and I'm looking at down the barrel of the second half of life and all this kind of stuff. And I had fooled myself as a 3-time Ironman, 14, 15 marathons, blah, 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 that extra 60 pounds that I was carrying was no problem. Again, that same delusion of, like seeing myself as, oh, it's no big deal. And I went to my doctor, who is himself also an endurance athlete. And he came back in, and he kind of said, and we have a very honest relationship with each other. He's like, Buck, you're not well. You're really not well. And I want to have you understand something. Like, this isn't a little bit, you need to drop 10 pounds. Like, you are pre-diabetic, you have hypertension, you are, your liver is pre-cirrhosis. Like, you are not a healthy person, and you will not make it. Forget about the second half of life. You won't make it much past this if you don't dramatically change your life. Okay, so it was a real come to Jesus, and I thought that, hey, wow, that was really shocking. And then what I alluded to, and I think I want to just take a second to mention, is this genetic revelation. At the same time, I also did Ancestry, right? And I did it, like a lot of people, to just find out more about my past and where my family come from. Because my dad had died at 64, and really a lot of his whole side of the family was unknown to me. Like, I didn't know anything about it. But what I did know is that he was Jewish, and his family was from like Latvia and Poland and things like that. So I do this Ancestry, and I get my test back, and there is 0 outside of basically the British Isles and a little bit of France and so Western Europe. And I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. Like, that doesn't jibe with what little I know. So, long story, very long emotional story short, found out my dad was not my dad. And what actually was the case was that I was born from a donor. And as fate would have it, I was actually able to track down that donor. And now I have a great relationship, and we chat almost every single day. But imagine at 50 years old, all of a sudden, everything that you thought about half of who you are wasn't true. Not that he wasn't still my dad. I still absolutely think of Frank Robinson as my dad, but genetically. So as I met my actual biological father, of course, the first question out of my mouth was, well, aside from nice to meet you, is there anything I need to know about, like, our family history? Like, if all of a sudden I find out that all of us have Parkinson's disease or something that might have a genetic marker to it, that's material. Well, one of the things that my biological father, Ron, told me is that he had 4 heart attacks, and that his father had died at 54 of a heart attack. So now I have this pairing of my doctor saying you're in bad shape, and now finding out that I have this genetic predisposition to heart problems. it was a wake up call. It was a neon flashing Vegas style change your life moment. And that's, I think, exactly what I needed. I think I needed that kind of a splash of not cold water, but for ice in my face to be like, hey, you still have time. You still have time to change things. And so, it's kind of like using a muscle you haven't used in a while. It was hard to get back into it, but at the same time, my children were at a different place in their lives. They didn't need to have diapers changed and all that kind of stuff that was so time and labor intensive. I could go and do things and not leave my wife in a situation where she was going to be totally overwhelmed with 3 toddlers and whatever. So timing wise, lifestyle wise, it actually ended up being kind of a blessing because I could get back into it. I just don't think I had a realization. I had deluded myself into thinking that I was not as far down as I was. And the reality was I'm 5'9" on a good day, 5'9.5" maybe. And I was well over 200 pounds and was having trouble being able to just keep up with my kids, let alone really go out and live the life that I wanted to live with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I learned from that was that there was a lot of what I thought I was doing to prioritize them and be a good dad in that capacity was in some ways not being a good dad, because what was filling the void, that whole nature pours a vacuum. So what was filling it were things that didn't require time, like cracking open a beer didn't take 3 hours of my time to go out and do, but I would spend 3 hours drinking on a weekend and turning into a bum. And that's what my children were seeing. And that's the dad I had become. And when I got both that health scare and a realization that I needed to change not just my physical activity, but also my choices that I was making of what I was putting into my body and how I was treating it, I became a better dad. And I became a better dad because I was more present, because I was more active in their life, both literally and figuratively, because I was presenting a better role model for them to follow, not just about how to take care of yourself, but how to deal with life. Like, instead of dealing with life by just, putting myself into a self-induced coma every weekend, to be like, hey, now, you know what? You face the tough stuff by being tough and showing them. And so while doing Ironman Lake Placid last year was not my first Ironman, it was 100% my most meaningful one because of all of this lead up to the story of where I had been, what I had allowed myself to become, and then to build back up. But more importantly, to have my children there at the finish line, seeing that, and to know all of what had been required of me to do it. Now, instead of looking at that time commitment and all of that blood, sweat, and tears as, oh, I can't believe dad's out there doing that, and gosh, he's not spending time with us, and he's an absentee father because of his workout schedule. Now it was, holy cow, our dad did that. And he did it not because it was easy. He did it because it was hard, and he committed to it. And I can remember actually sitting there with my family at dinner and saying, I'm going to do an Ironman next year. And all of them, once we cleaned up the table after they spit all their milk out, right? It was like, they're like, yeah, sure, Dad. Like, come on, maybe we set our sights a little lower there, shall we? And I'm like, no, I need that big, hairy, audacious goal to keep myself accountable and to provide myself with something that can motivate me to get out of bed and get going. And it did. And actually, last year, I did an Ironman, 2 half Ironmans, 3 ultra marathons, including 100K, which was the hardest of all of them, and a marathon. So it was a big year last year.
So what I find fascinating is that you and I's stories are parallel in a lot of ways. The biggest difference was I did not have that foundation of fitness beforehand. I'm also an older father. My first child was born when I was 42 years old. Shortly after she was born, I also had a come to reality moment with my primary care doctor, who was also an endurance athlete. She was a runner. She has since stopped running after major knee and hip surgery, but she still understands the concept. And we had the same discussion. I was literally asked, do you have any intention of seeing your daughter graduate high school? Because at the rate you're going right now, you won't.
Yeah.
And I had to turn around. You talk about being over 200. I had gotten up to 255 pounds at 5'6".
Yeah.
Now I quit drinking, which was the major issue that I was having, was liver problems.
Yep.
I had, shortly after I had been diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic, which again, medication, diet, following what the doctor says, and I'm doing great. However, it wasn't until I got involved with Athletic as an ambassador that I began doing any type of endurance sports. And believe it or not, and when did you join the ambassador team? Was it 2021?
Yeah, I'm on my 4th year with.
Okay, so you and I are in the same class.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I got my email literally on April Fool's Day of 2021, and I was convinced it was one of my buddies messing with me. I actually called them on the phone to confirm.
Yeah, like I said, listen, this is cruel and unusual punishment if you're tricking me with this one.
Exactly, exactly. But that first Memorial Day weekend was when they issued their triathlon challenge to get a free case of Athletic beer. And that was the first time I'd ever done anything like this. They gave us 3 days to complete it, and I completed it in 2. And afterwards, I told my wife, I'm 49 years old. I feel like I should do something epic before I turn 50. And she said, sure. And I said, well, I'm too smart to like jump out of a perfectly good airplane or something silly like that. If I could do all of these three things, the swimming for 30 minutes, running 3 miles, and biking 30 miles, I did it all in 2 days.
Yeah.
I said, if I could do this in 2 days, I could do it in 1.
Yep.
And much like you talked about your family, my wife's response was, well, sure, but why would you want to? And I laughed and I said, I'm about to turn 50. I'm going to do it. And she said, sure, buy a bike first and like actually ride outside and that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I signed up to do my first one, and I just did a sprint. I was dead last. I was dead last by a large margin. I could have shaved 10 minutes off my final time and I still would have been dead last. But the point is, I finished.
Yeah, you sure did.
And it felt amazing. The next year, I did 4 more sprints in an Olympic. Last year, we pushed ourselves a little hard and ended up with a slight injury. This year, we're taking it a little lighter and just doing 4.
Yeah.
But it really has become like part of a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Now, my kids are in school. My youngest is in 1st grade now. I just have the 2, and my daughter's in 4th. So I'm able to get some workouts in and get a lot of my training work done while they're at school.
Yeah.
That's a huge help.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean it's easy, because as you said, going on a long bike ride,
sure,
if you're trying to do a 60 80-mile bike ride, you're going to be gone for 3, 4, 5 hours.
Yep.
And even with them in school, that's hard to juggle.
Yeah. And that's the real, like the fact that you can't shortcut these things. Like, the time is the time, the miles are the miles. You have to put it in. There's no way to be able to say, well, I'm going to take this pill and this will be the equivalent of doing 50 miles worth of riding or something like that. I mean, like, you just have to. So it's from a lifestyle perspective. Again, part of what I told myself, the story I told myself, was that I had this time in my life when I had been allowed to be, quote unquote, selfish and do all of this stuff. And now my family required me to do something else with that time. And I did it very willingly, and I did it, and it was a lovely thing. But I went too far the other end of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that I didn't do them any great service by not taking care of myself.
Right.
And I'm very thankful that I have this opportunity to rectify that and to create better balance now. So, like, I'm still able to do all the things that I need to do and want to do as their father, but I'm also able to do the things that I need to do for myself to keep myself in a healthy place, mentally, physically, and otherwise, so that I can be that great father and not coming home and having all sorts of emotional baggage and things out of whack because the way I was treating my stress was through self-medication instead of by going out and doing something positive that would allow me to get centered again.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that we talk about a lot here at the National At Home Dad Network is that self-care is one of the most important things that you can do for your family.
Right.
I mean, even though it's taking care of yourself, I don't care how much you love being a parent, a father, or whatever your job is, at some point, burnout happens, and you have to do something to refill your own self before you can start supporting others.
Yep.
It has reached a point in our house where there have been days that I've been sitting at home, and I start getting a little snappy with the kids, or I start getting frustrated, and I've had my wife turn around and look me straight in the eye and say, "Just go on a bike ride."
Yeah, that's exactly
and I'm
right.
like, "What?" She's like, "Put the bike in the car, go to the trail, and just go ride. I've got this. I'll see you in a few hours, and you'll be better off."
Yeah.
And she's not wrong.
Right.
She's not wrong. Now, again, I know that, I've been doing the sprint and Olympic distance triathlons, which, mostly are through the USAT.
Yep.
Which is, the governing body. They make sure that everything is safe and that type of thing. There are a couple of other organizations, CalTri comes to mind, that also do races. It's largely just a matter of making sure that the safety is in place, that, the infrastructure is there, because even a sprint distance triathlon, you're talking about almost half a mile swimming, often in open water.
Yep.
Usually a bike ride that is at least 12 miles. And I think the longest one I've done for a sprint was 20.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And then a 5K run, which, you're talking about shutting down roads, having police blocking traffic.
Yep.
You've got to bring in EMTs just in case, because anytime you're doing something this physically strenuous, you have to worry that, sometimes people might have an occurrence that requires a doc on site.
For sure.
So even with the smaller distance ones that I've done, there's been a lot of training involved.
Sure.
For my training, before the kids were in school, there was a lot of waking up long before the sun came up.
Yeah.
Because that was the only time I could get in a run. And go out and run, come back, take a shower, and then wake the kids up for school or whatever was going to happen. Bike ride, those are a little harder to do because I prefer not to be out riding my bike in the dark. That's a really good way to not come home.
Right.
Now, again, I have an indoor trainer that's behind this screen behind me, like most people that are doing this seriously.
Sure.
However, much like treadmills, they're terrible. There's no enjoyment there.
It's a form of torture. Yeah, I understand.
What were you doing to help balance things out schedule wise?
Well, yeah. So no two ways about it. It's hard, but you pick your hard, right? I mean, like there's lots of hards, and if you have made a priority that this is something that you really want to do, then you just need to recognize that there are going to be sacrifices that need to be made to change things in order to accomplish that. And that, again, is both something you have to reconcile for yourself, but you also have to have that conversation with your partner and your family to say, hey, listen, Dad's going to be doing this stuff. Now, as it turns out, for me, it's easier to do things earlier because my family aren't a bunch of morning people and I am. So if I'm like, hey, I can knock some of this stuff out before you guys are even awake, then I'm not taking any time away from us. I'm just putting time in for me. Now, the flip side of that may be Dad needs to take a nap in the afternoon where you guys are all having all this energy, but one way or another, we're gonna figure out how to make that work and fit it in. And I think that's one of the things that's, like, again, I gravitated towards triathlon coming out of running. Running was a natural kind of evolution after having done a marathon to say, okay, where do I want to go? What's the next big mountain to climb, right? That was a real part of that mentality in my 30s. As a 50-year-old man, I look at it from a different perspective. And I talked to a mentor, some folks that maybe you're saying, well, triathlon sounds really intimidating. And I want to make it very clear, and I say to them all the time, triathlon and Ironman are two totally different things.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that an Ironman is a triathlon doesn't mean that all triathlons are Ironman. So just don't make them synonymous. Two, a lot of people will come to me and they'll say things like, well, at this age, I'm having knee issues or hip issues or blah, 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 blah. And I get it. We all have aches and pains, and growing old is not easy. So I think that one of the things that really is beneficial about triathlon is that it has this balanced approach, right? You're not just doing a repetitive use exercise that can have that kind of wear and tear like running can if you're not doing anything else. So the swimming balances out a lot of the muscle that you're going to build as a cyclist will help you be a better runner and things like that. So the three of them play off of each other in a very physically beneficial way. I also think that it has, from a training perspective, to know that you're doing these different things, it keeps it from getting very monotonous, right? Like you're switching things up all the time and you have this ability to mentally be stimulated to say, oh, I don't have to do a long run today. I'm doing a swim today or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Almost everybody who comes into the sport has a preferred mode, right? Like I'm good at this one. These other two are either weaker or frankly intimidating. And one of the things that I say to people a lot is, okay, I get it. I totally get it. You've never swam outside of a pool before, or you've never swam in this kind of a capacity where, because I explain to people, I'm like, yo, listen, just because you can swim, I thought I could swim too. Swimming and triathlon swimming are totally different animals. Like when you jump into the water with 1,500 people, it's not like going down to the YMCA and grabbing the lane. You know what I mean? Like it's a different animal. But that said, if you don't try to take it on yourself and just learn to the extent of your bad habits, but you get some good direction, you learn some good form, and you're able to get out there and do it in a safe way, you're going to have a much more enjoyable experience. If you go out there and you just kind of muddle your way through it, I liken it all the time. I'm like, swimming especially is a lot more akin to golf, right? Like golf is all about technique, Like, it's not just go out there and have a whack at it and see what happens. You want to do that, you're going to have an awfully long day out on the course, and your score is going to be in the 300s. So if you want to actually do it and do it well, get some instruction on how to swing properly, and then go out there and have some fun. Swimming is exactly the same way. It's not, I realized when I finally got some coaching that I knew how to not drown. I didn't know how to swim. I knew how to not drown. And so once I learned how to actually swim, I'm one of the things that I'm doing of taking on for 2024 is, after that crazy year of 2023 to kind of prove to myself that I could do this stuff again, I kind of said, okay, I'm off all right, let's keep raising the bar every year, because time-wise and physical-wise, that was not a perspective I had as a 54-year-old.
Right.
But it was to say, what can we do that's different? Like, what can we do that's different that keeps me excited and gives me a new challenge? And what I've chosen to do this year is something that's a new sport to me called swim run, which actually is, until I did my first one a couple of weeks ago, I had no real feel for what I was getting myself into. And now I'm like, well, now it's too late. I'm already sucked into the pitcher plant and I can't get out. But I'm swimming like 6-7 miles a week and running about 35 miles a week. And so the bike portion is out, but boy, I've made up for it in terms of how much time I'm spending in the water and running. And that's been really interesting to see what that's now done to my body and to my like VO2 max and all of these different bio indicators that I have about my fitness level. But mentally, it's also given me a really exciting new place where, again, I'm starting way back down at the bottom. Like, I'm like, all right, this is all new and exciting and kind of intimidating and pretty scary, but we're going to get out there and we're going to give it a try. And it has been really exciting to do things like that. And again, like, one of the perspectives that I have is like, not, okay, I'm going to go climb Mount Everest or do something crazy. That, no offense to anybody who wants to do that. To me, that's crazy. But my son has now gotten into triathlon, and my son has really gotten into running and all this kind of stuff. So to know that one of these markers that I can put out in the future is to say, someday I'd like us, my son and I, to be able to do this. And to know that while he could probably do it in 1/3 the time it will take me, to know that we could do it together and that we would have that experience is the motivation I need to keep going. Like that's what motivates me. It's not, I'm going to win this race, or I'm going to be up on a podium, or I'm going to do all this kind of, it's like, hey, as a 60-year-old, I'm still going to be able to go out. And as a 65-year-old, I want to still be able to, and as a 70-year-old, and just having the ability to know that I can have that chapter of our relationship, God willing, knock on wood, that nothing else interferes with that, but to know that I have that opportunity to have those kind of memories with my son and or daughters, if they choose to, is really empowering to know that that's living the life I want to live, and not looking at it and saying coulda, shoulda, woulda, and oh yeah, that would have been nice. I could have very easily, and I did for a long time, live my life looking in the rearview mirror and resting on past success and saying, well, what do I have to prove? I did an Ironman before. I don't need to prove it to anybody. You know who I needed to prove it to? I needed to prove it to myself. I needed to prove it to the guy in the mirror who every day was waking up. And part of the reason I was drinking way too much, there's a lot of, that's always a very complicated scenario. But one of the components to that was this self disillusionment of like knowing I had been able to do these things before and how far I had let myself go. And it was this negative self-fulfilling prophecy that the more then that I would drink to make myself forget about how disappointed I was with myself, the more disappointed I would be with myself. So then I would drink some more to try and boy, it just sucked me right down.
Oh yeah.
And to be in a position now to say, listen, Am I able to run as fast as I used to? No. Am I able to do the things that I used to be able to do? No. But I don't care. I'm still doing it. I'm still doing something, and it's keeping me centered, and it's keeping me from flying off the handle with my kids, and it's making me a better husband, and it's making me a happier person individually. And therefore, the time and the effort that are required, if I'm looking at it as what's my ROI on that, it's huge. It's a huge ROI in terms of all of not just the direct benefits, but the residual benefits or the ripple effect across all of our lives.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, as an example, I go back and look at pictures of myself from 2014, 2015, when I had gotten up over 250 pounds. And I showed one to my daughter the other day, and she didn't believe that was me.
Yeah.
She's like, that doesn't even look like you.
Right.
I think it's great that your son is also doing this. That's an amazing bonding thing. My daughter is 10, and for the last probably year of doing triathlon, about 50% of the races that I do, I'll bring the family to. Now, granted, when I'm doing the shorter distances, the sprints in the Olympics, it's a little bit easier to bring the family because, you know, it's 3 hours.
It's not an all-day endeavor, right?
Yeah. Whereas with an Ironman, you know, you start and, you know, sub 14-hour race is considered amazing. You know, you got 17 hours to complete it. So Dad's gone for a really long time.
Yeah.
I'm actually doing a bike ride this coming Saturday for the Tour de Cure.
Yeah.
Where I'm going to be doing 100 kilometers on a bike. In again, what they always call rolling hills.
Be careful of those rolling hills.
Yeah, 3,100 feet of elevation of climbing over the 62 miles. But I'm not bringing my family to that one because, like I told my wife, there's no fun there. Like, you guys can watch me leave, and then you're just not going to see me again for 4 hours.
Yeah, and that's exactly the same scenario now that I know with swim run. It's like you see me at the beginning, you see me at the end. There's nothing. There's nowhere to see me along the way. So it's not spectator friendly.
and for the people who aren't familiar with swim run, because you had to explain this to me, and I'm not going to lie, I still can't wrap my head around it. You're basically doing short distance swims. Then you get out of the water, and then you do like trail running through the woods.
Right.
And then you get to another point where you swim again. Like you swim multiple times and run multiple times. It's not like triathlon where you swim, then you're done swimming.
Correct. Yeah, so, it's not these nice distinct modes that you're doing.
I just have one question about the whole swim run, man.
Sure.
How is it that after swimming and then running and then swimming and then running, you have any skin left on your feet?
So actually, it's interesting.
Like, I feel like my feet would be one giant blister running wet.
So a lot of people ask me about that, and actually, I wear compression socks, like the high knee, the almost knee high compression socks. So that and the reason for that is less for the compression on my calves, but so that rocks and things can't get into the socks themselves. If they were lower, they might get dirt and stuff in there. So to kind of keep it as a barrier. And I do. So you are swimming with trail shoes on. So you're running and then you're jumping in the water, and so you're swimming with shoes on the entire time. And from a drainage perspective, they actually drain pretty well. Some people drill holes in them and things like that. I don't actually see the value in doing that, but yeah, it's crazy. Like how the whole sport got started was on as case would be, a drunken bet. A drunken bet, actually, in as a lot of these things do. In Sweden, and in Sweden, there's a large archipelago of small islands. And what they said is that could you make it from this point to this point in a certain amount of time? And there's no way you could do it by just running. There's islands. You have to be able to get from one to the other. So that to this day, that course that was the original one is still the world champion course, and that's the nature of it. It's actually, I would like to call it more. It's more like an adventure race, honestly, because unlike a triathlon where there's this nicely laid out swim course and everybody just follows the course. This is more like you get to the end of the trail and then there's like a blinking light, a quarter of a mile away, and you swim, or a flag, and you go swim to that, and then you get out and you run, you follow the trail, and then you get to the next body of water and you swim across that. And so this race that I have coming up in August is a total of 5 miles of swimming, but it's not 5 contiguous miles. It's 5 miles broken up into the longest. I think the longest section swim is about 1,700 meters. So that's a little bit over a mile in terms of the total, that distance. And then the run is, again, same thing. It's broken up, but it's about 18 miles worth of total running. But that's it. And the funny thing about it too, is that you do it as a team. So you can't, and when I say you do it as a team, it's not like, hey, I'll meet you at the end, off you go. It's like you're tethered together, like you are connected. So you gotta make it through all of these challenges together, and that includes getting lost. If you get lost, off you get lost together. At least you have somebody out there to share that experience with. That's right.
Again. Now Arvis is watching us live, and he asked, "What made you choose triathlon instead of another sport?" I mean, you talked about how you had done marathon, and it just seemed like the next logical progression.
Yeah, and so there was like a part of that, and there was also another kind of part of it that my family is actually from the Big Island of Hawaii, and people who understand triathlon know that that's kind of the mecca of the sport, because for many, 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 many years that was where the Ironman World Championship has been held. It still is, but it's now split. But so there was a little bit of a connection and familiarity with it based on that. But I think the main thing that made me choose it was just, again, to be able to say, hey, for me, I had grown up swimming, so not in a competitive environment, but just in terms of having a pool in the back and, again, not drowning. Running was something I felt comfortable with because I was learning how to do that, and that's pretty self-explanatory, although it's got a lot more technique to it than I maybe knew in the beginning. It was really the cycling that intimidated the heck out of me. I was not a biker.
Really?
Yeah, I was not a biker. I had never been a biker. As a kid growing up, I was a skateboarder. I was not the dude riding the BMX and doing all that stuff. So it was my first experience. When I first bike that I rode in a triathlon was the first bike I had ever had that had gears. So I had to learn how to shift gears and do all that kind of stuff as a 30-year-old. That was more intimidating than anything. And when I stopped doing it for a while, I'll be the first to admit cycling is still the scariest part to me. And it's the scariest part, not because of the physical requirements of it, but because just the training on the road. I've had so many close calls with cars. I've had so many bad interactions with jerks that want to throw beer cans at you. I'm like, what do I need this for in my life, right? So when I train in places where I feel like I'm safe. I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. But I will say this, when I signed up for, so 2022, I say to my family, I'm going to do an Ironman. The guffawing and the sure dad and all this kind of stuff. And my wife saying, oh boy, here we go again. Because she had been through it before. She knew what she was, when I say that, what that requires. And she is the best Sherpa in the world. She is unbelievably supportive and all this kind of stuff. But she still knew that this was what I was signing up for. So what I said to myself is, I'm going to do an Ironman. Then Athletic
Mm-hmm.
opens up this opportunity to be on team athletic. And I said, well, hey, listen, I haven't actually signed up for one yet, so I might as well see what happens with that. And I sign up for that. And lo and behold, I get chosen as the oldest member of the team, by the way, to be in part of this. And now it's really serious because I'm like, uh-oh, be careful what you wish for. Now you've really
Right.
now it's not just you've got a team that you've got to be a part of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wasn't like they said, well, which one do you want to do? They were kind of like, here's the one we're going to be sponsoring and that this team is going to be doing. And I was cool with the idea of having this destination race,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know that I would have chosen Lake Placid.
Let's say, if I'm not mistaken, Lake Placid is like the hardest course in the continental U.S. Is it not?
It is. And actually, since Mount Tremblant is no longer doing a full Iron anymore, it is the hardest in North America, period. And it was, I'm not going to lie. The week before the race, I was a wreck. I was not sleeping. I was having trouble eating. I was a wreck. And it had nothing to do with the race. Like, jump in the water and swim 2.4 miles, no problem. That doesn't intimidate me at all. Run a marathon, not intimidating. Riding a bike up and down mountains scared the living daylights out of me. Like, when I saw some of these mountains that we were going to be going downhill on, I had never in my life been on a bike going over 30 miles an hour. And now I was going to be doing 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. The amount of time that you have to react to something is a nanosecond.
Mm-hmm.
And if you make the wrong decision, they're not, dusting you off and putting you back on your bike. Like, they're coming out with a scoop and just picking you up and tossing you into you're done.
You're not going to finish the race.
You're not going to finish. Hopefully you're not. Hopefully that's the best case scenario is you're not finishing the race.
I mean, I've seen a lot of people who have taken spills on bikes during races, and it's not uncommon to see a lot of broken collarbones.
Yeah, a lot of
a lot of road rash, a lot of broken arm, wrist, that type of thing.
Well, Amy, one of the people who was a really experienced Iron woman on our team, had been out riding the course the month before, took a crash, broke her collarbone, and was out. So that was kind of the context, is like, hey, this is an experienced person who has done this course before, and she's out with a, so it was scary. And I got off of that bike, and I'm telling you, I saw my wife and I went, I survived. Like, that was the greatest. I'm like, I can't wait to run a marathon. This is the greatest feeling of my life, is just getting off that damn bike. So I still, to this day, have those. It's still intimidating, but I also think that that's what makes it so exciting, because it's like, hey, that's a major thing that you can look at in your life and say, I faced it. It was intimidating as heck, but I did it. And I say to people all the time when they're like, why did you get into endurance sports? Why did you, I'm like, listen, you do a marathon or something like that, you're never the same person on the other side of that. Never. You have changed yourself in ways that you can't imagine, because you saw it as just a race. You saw it as just, I'm going out there and spending some hours doing this. It's so much more than that. Mm-hmm. It's so much more of a self-revelation to be able to say, who am I? What am I made of? Like, what am I capable of? And if I'm able to do this, how many other things in my life am I intimidated by, or am I saying, oh, I could never, blah, 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 fill in the blanks. Mm-hmm. And that's all self-imposed. Like, it's all this self-imposed, you can't do this because you just are too afraid to say, what would it take? And when you come out of that on the other side, you're like, dude, I could do so much more. Why am I settling for only allowing this to define my life when there's so much more that could be done?
Now, from what I've seen, you've remained relatively injury-free.
I have been very, knock on wood, I'm going to say that.
Yeah. I
walk out here
hate you with that, but
I have been relatively injury free. That's not to say that I haven't had any injuries, but the ones that I've had, well, I'll say this: 3 years ago, when I was just getting started with this renaissance in my life, my family and I went up to a local ski resort, and we were doing tubing. Right, as like
Mhm.
who gets hurt? I could see. I was intentionally not skiing because I didn't want to get hurt, but who would have thought tubing, right? So I'm sitting there on the tube, and the tube starts spinning, and it's you have no ability to control it, so you just kind of go
Right.
with it. And my leg caught on something, and it flipped over. And as I landed, I said to myself, literally, I will never be able to run again. Like it was that traumatic that
Oh.
I had wrenched my knee sideways,
Oh.
and I just said, I will never run again. And that's okay. I was like at peace with that. I was alive. And so went and saw a surgeon, and the surgeon's like, well, we could try and fix this and do that, but you may be able to get away with just doing physical therapy, but it's going to take you a long time. Like, you have to be very patient with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had never done physical therapy before. I went to physical therapy. It was much harder than I thought it was going to be. It required me to use muscles I had never used before. I had to eat a lot of humble pie and be like standing on this balance thing and trying to figure out how to do this and all that. But I came back from that not only able to run, but actually a better runner than ever before. And so the challenges that I've had physically, I feel very blessed that I've been able to figure out how to turn that negative into a positive. And I've had at least 3 injuries like that have allowed me to be able to come back. But in every case, I could have become my own worst enemy by either doing one of 2 things. I could have either said, push too far, too fast,
Mm-hmm.
and try and rip the Band-Aid off and do harm in the process. I have lots of friends who do that on a consistent basis. They're like, oh, I'm feeling great, I'm going to go out for a 50-mile run. And then next thing you know, they're right back where they started. Or 2, not do anything and just say, oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, that was nice. Throw my hands up. Let's go back to being a bum again. And
Mm-hmm.
I could have easily chosen either one of those. Instead, I kind of found a way of saying, no, this is a lesson. Learn from it, change, adapt, and grow. And in all of those cases, I've actually come out better on the other side of it. And it's changed my perspective in like just before Ironman, but
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks before Ironman, I had a huge bike crash, which again did not help my mentality
No.
coming into this. And my carbon fiber, beautiful tri-bike was totaled. And so what I did was I had like dislocated my shoulder. So I am in rolling out of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I was really worried about what that would do for my swim. So I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to swim, not just well, but maybe not at
At
all.
all. Right.
And with some PT help and some dedication, I actually was able to go on and not only just do the swim, but I actually PR'd that swim.
Nice.
It's interesting because against all of my other Ironmen, like
Mm-hmm.
slower on the bike, I was slower on the run, but my swim actually got better, which is why I kind of looked at swim run with this, well, maybe my body's telling me something. Maybe that's where I need to go with how I train going forward.
And what I find so odd is you talk about the bike being the part that you worry about. I'm exactly the opposite. Like, I absolutely love and adore the bike.
Yeah.
I'm okay with swimming, and I hate every second of the run. Like, running is just brutal torture to me.
Yes.
Now, part of that may very well be that I am lucky enough to live in an area where I have 40-mile greenways
Yeah.
that only have one street crossing.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference, being able to be off the road. I think it was maybe last year or the year before, that I signed up to do the Everest Challenge, where we had to get the 29,030 feet of elevation in 50 days. And living in Durham, North Carolina, we don't really have mountains here. But I was able to identify some like neighborhood roads that had hills. Part of the route that I found that gave me the most elevation did involve about half a mile on an actual relatively busy road. And I totally understand that fear. I avoid riding on public roads as much as I humanly can. Just because, like you said, there's a lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, seeing cyclists on the road angers them.
Yeah, that's like you're the dog they come home to kick. They had a bad day, they're going to take it out on you. I don't know why, but
yeah, I mean, I've never been able to figure it out. When I come up behind a cyclist, I mean, granted, a lot of times it's a 2-lane road and it's kind of a pain in the butt because you got to slow down and pace them until you can safely pass.
Right.
But being a cyclist myself, I'm still going to give them that full lane of traffic as I pass them, no matter what.
Yep.
And I don't care how long it takes.
Yep.
We are coming up on an hour here. And I do want to start, bringing things home a little bit. I will point out, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about inspiring your children. My daughter, who at the time that I did my first triathlon was 6, almost 7. I think it was the second year that she started asking me when she could do one. And my patented response was, well, you got to get the training wheels off your bike first. They don't allow training wheels in triathlon. This past Easter weekend, she got her training wheels off of her bike.
Nice.
And started doing laps around the park. And it took her about maybe 30 minutes of riding laps around the park before she stopped in front of me and said, okay, I'm ready to do a triathlon now. So we actually have told her that this year the schedule is already set, so we can't make it happen. But in the state of North Carolina, there's actually 2 kids triathlons that they do every year that are a little bit shorter distance. What we're going to sign up and do is the one that also offers an adult sprint the same weekend. And the adult sprint starts, I want to say, at like 7 o'clock. And the kids triathlon starts at 9. So I should be finished and recovered enough to cheer her on for hers. And she wants to, and her challenge is to see which of us can place the highest in our age group.
There you go.
And I've already told her that I'm 90% sure that'll be her.
Yeah. Well, my son will be a better triathlete than I ever could have imagined myself being. He's already much faster than I could have ever been. Whether or not he's going to gravitate towards the endurance stuff, I don't know. But it's obviously the hook is set as far as he's concerned. Yeah. He's out there crushing it. For my daughters, I don't think there's any interest on their part in doing it from a physical perspective. I think that fine. What they've learned from me, from the takeaway from it, has been grit and determination. That to endure the hard things in life is a measure of how you are going to how are you going to present yourself to hard things? Are you going to roll over and play dead, or are you going to face them and get yourself through it? And again, at the Ironman, that was the first time my daughters had ever been at a race like that. And of course, Ironman does an enormous. It's like a circus. There's a lot of stuff to do, and Athletic did an amazing job of providing them with VIP passes and all sorts of stuff, which was fantastic. But I tell you, when the way that it, the swim was the swim. There's two loops, and then the bike was 2 loops. When I would have opportunities and I knew that I was going to see them, and it helped me so much to know that they were there screaming and yelling for their dad and just getting me through it. And sometimes during those loneliest and hardest moments, just knowing that was waiting for me was enough to keep me going.
Oh yeah.
And that meant the world to me, like I say, to have them see their dad come across. The guy who had been passed out on the couch for more weekends than they could count for most of their life was here, coming across and hearing you are an Ironman again. Was huge.
Now,
huge.
I will point out, as you had said earlier, Ironman is a brand.
Yeah.
It is not a definition of triathlon.
Correct.
They throw big races. I'll come out and say it. They also throw really expensive races.
Yes, they are.
There are independent. I know that there are independent 70.3, which is the half Ironman distance. I'm sure that there's got to be somebody out there doing an independent 140.6.
For sure.
I haven't come across it. Because I'm eyeballing one of the independent 70.3s here in North Carolina, potentially for next year.
There you go. Great.
Because I want to do that and prove I can do it before I spend the money to do a 70.3 with Ironman.
That's a great idea.
I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you being here. I'm actually going to be in your neck of the woods for a race in June 8th.
Oh, wow. Great.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be, I think it's the Jamestown Triathlon.
Okay, great. Just down the road in Williamsburg. Yeah, great.
Yeah. So I'm going to be doing the Jamestown Sprint. It's my last sprint of the year, and then the next two are both going to be Olympic distance for the rest of the year. And then next year is probably just going to focus on Olympic and either finish with a 70.3 or do Olympic the whole season and have 2026 be a race being a 70.3 and everything else just being supporting building to that, which I'm sure you understand.
Taking that long perspective, again, is going back to the subject of getting hurt. When you try to ask your body to do too much too soon, bad things happen. So take the long perspective on things, look at it as a lifestyle, not a singular point of, and look at it in terms of what's it going to take to really get yourself not just physically capable of doing it, but mentally prepared for that. And taking the long perspective is always a good idea. Yeah.
And again, we talk about, not only the mental grit that it takes to do these kind of things, but you also have the whole idea of what it does for you physically. Again, I can't speak for you. At my heaviest, I got up to 255 pounds at 5'6". At that point, I was almost as wide as I was tall. At least it felt that way. As of a couple of days ago was the last time I actually stepped on a scale. At this point, I'm down in the 175 pound range.
Good for you. That's fantastic.
In the last year, I had to replace my tri-suit, my cycling kit, because none of them fit anymore, which again is a good problem to have.
Yeah.
I'm in better shape now than I was in my 20s and 30s. I never had that fitness basis. Now, again, we got Arvis asking another question. Now, Arvis has got a couple of teenage twin boys at home, so he feels your pain on twin.
I hear you. Yeah.
He says, do you have any advice to give dads wanting to be an inspiration to their children, their community, or anything else? I know my answer to that has always been the same thing, and that's just do the hard things.
Yeah.
And do them loud. Don't be quiet about it. Let people know what you're doing.
And that perspective has served me in both the physical capacity, which is, like being able to say, hey, I set this goal and I worked hard to achieve it. And so therefore I can inspire other people to do hard things because I didn't just say you can do it and then not do it myself. But it has also been a major part of my journey to sobriety that I just don't believe in recovery as something you do on your own. I mean, yes, it is. It's a choice you make for yourself, but it's so much easier in community to do it when you say, hey, we're all having this hard time. We're all getting through this. We're all facing a lot of the same demons. We're all facing a lot of the same societal pressures, and we can get through it. We can prove to each other that we can get through it. And if somebody falls down during that, we all help them get back up and get back on the right path again. And there's nothing about that has ever prompted me to say, this is a shameful thing. I need to keep this all to myself. I'm embarrassed by it. I did a lot of embarrassing things, but I'm proud of my sobriety. I'm proud of the recovery and what has gone. I'm as proud of that as I am of any Ironman. I see them as two parts of the same whole.
Absolutely.
They both required me to make some hard choices in my life and to get out of my comfort zone, to change the way I was doing things, because the way that I was doing things weren't serving me in a positive way. And while there was a lot of sacrifice and hard choices involved, the outcome was so much more worthwhile than I could have ever imagined. That why did I wait so long to do it? I can make that exact same statement for both of those parts of my life.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you on that one. One of the things that I am incredibly thankful for is that I got that wake-up call from my doc. I was lucky enough to get that wake-up call when my daughter was just over 4.5 months old.
Yep.
So as a result, neither one of my kids ever saw me in that way.
Yeah.
Which again, that helps.
Yeah.
That helps knowing that they didn't see that. At the same time, we also have very openly spoken about why it is that dad doesn't drink.
Right.
Because again, my wife is one of those people who can have a glass of wine with dinner once a week and let that be the end of it. And I'm not.
Yep. Nope.
That was never in the cards for me.
So I just want you to say though, when I got that wake up call from my doctor a year later, he sat down with me and said, forget what I'm looking at in terms of how you physically changed in terms of your physique. I'm looking at your numbers, right? Your numbers are so dramatically different that it's almost like you couldn't tell me if you put them side by side that this is the same human being. And he said, I want you to know something, Buck. I have that same intervention type of conversation with 100 guys a year. 95 of them don't change.
Yeah.
95 of them change maybe for a month or two, and then they go right back to it. So, everything, there's hard in life in every way you look at it. So you choose your hard. And in Ironman and triathlon has taught me that if I choose the hard that most people don't choose, I'll probably end up happier as a result of that. So I'm not going with the crowd. I'm going with what I know is going to serve my personality the best. And part of that is something that is going to challenge me on a number of different fronts, but also physically and mentally and emotionally balance me so that I can keep going, so that I can endure. And I think that's the word that has just really permeated everything about how I've changed in my life, is my ability to look at hard circumstances as just that. This is a circumstance that with endurance I can overcome.
Yeah.
Whether it's a business challenge, whether it's a financial challenge, whether it's a physical challenge, whether it's an emotional challenge, it is something that with enough time and patience and endurance, I can overcome and turn into a positive. And that has, if I leave my children with one takeaway that I hope that will serve them well in their lives, it's that perspective.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's a perfect thought to end this on. I do want to thank you for your time. I want to thank everybody who was with us live. I also want to thank everybody who's going to be watching this on replay, because we do get a lot of people watching it on replay. This will be on our YouTube. It'll be on our Facebook, for people to watch at their leisure. One of the things that I want to mention is that the National At-Home Dad Network is a 100% volunteer-run organization. If you have an interest in volunteering with us, Dale Van Vlera is our volunteer coordinator. That's his email address right there on the screen. If you want to reach out to Dale, we're always looking for volunteers to help us in any way that you can. Home DadCon this year, which is one of the largest fatherhood conventions out there, is going to be happening in St. Louis, Missouri, from October 17th through the 19th this year. And you can get all the details on our website. And we are in the midst of our Father's Day membership push, between Mother's Day and Father's Day. We're encouraging anybody who is supportive of the mission of the National At-Home Dad Network to become a member of our organization. If you go to our website, once again, at athomedad.org, you can get all the details about membership, as well as the benefits that come with that, and all of the things that your support enables us to do. So on behalf of the National At-Home Dad Network, I want to thank both Buck and everybody who's joined us. Everybody have a nice day, and we'll see you next month. Bye.
Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.